I had just moved in to this beautiful two-story craftsman style building. It was split up into two apartments, the bottom unit and then the top stairs unit, which is what me, my infant daughter, and my husband lived in. And it was just a really beautiful, perfect apartment for us at the time. It had these beautiful hardwood floors throughout and just gigantic windows. And it was in the more rural part of town, but still like pretty close to town. It was only like a 15-minute drive into the main area of town, so we were able to get places easily, but we had more privacy and it was safer than the main part of town. So we really liked that since we had a young daughter at the time. And yeah, it was surprisingly affordable. I remember we were shocked. Um, it looked like it would have been 3 times more per month than we were paying. So we felt really, really, really lucky to be there. I just always felt really uncomfortable there. I always felt like I was encroaching on someone else's territory. I felt like I was always being watched. I never felt at peace or alone. I just felt unwanted in that apartment. Soon after moving in, our downstairs neighbor, he was a really nice guy. We got to talking and he brought up the two girls who used to live there before we did. And he mentioned that 4 months before we moved in, they had gone missing. And it was really strange. They just like disappeared without a trace, really. The police came in and they searched the apartment to see if anything strange had happened in there, anything like suspicious had happened. And they didn't find anything. They didn't see any sign of a struggle. It didn't look like anything had been stolen. Their wallets were gone, their car was gone, and that's all they knew. No one knew where they were. And our neighbor then mentioned that the weird thing that happened before they went missing was they were acting really on edge, just really jumpy whenever he would see them. And they looked like they hadn't slept in a really long time, so he thought that maybe they had just started partaking in a lifestyle that had gotten them into some trouble. But he said that as far as he knew, they were still missing. And I mean, understandably, that story kind of was a bit spooky to my husband, but it really just affected me on a whole different level because I already felt so uneasy about living in this apartment. But I tried to hold back my feelings of unease as much as I could. I knew that this was a really perfect apartment and I didn't want to ruin it for something that I might be just making up in my head. And so I just tried to ignore all of the bad feelings that I was having. But the more I tried to ignore them, the weirder things started getting. For instance, when I would be in the shower, as I was in the shower and as the water was running, I would hear these humming noises that seemed to come from above. And I tried to tell myself that they were just water pipes. Because this was an old house and creaky pipes will make weird noises, but these particular humming noises were just so musical in nature that it didn't sound like any creaky pipes that I'd ever heard. But I tried to tell myself that everything was okay, and I just tried to move on. But then more stuff started happening. Like when my husband and I would be watching TV, like there was this one particular time when we were watching this funny movie, and a really funny part had happened, and I could have swore that just like behind us, but also like up high, I heard this like snorting noise over my husband's laughter. He didn't seem to notice, so I just tried to ignore it. And then I just started having these really, really, really bad dreams. Like, I would be laying in bed and my eyes would open. I'd be laying on my back and I would just look up and my eyes would be drawn to the vent on the ceiling. And I would see these two glistening spots. And then everything would just like fade to black. And I was having this dream almost every night, and as the nights progressed, I started to make out what the glints were more and more each night. And it wasn't long until I realized that I wasn't just looking at like inanimate objects glistening. I wasn't looking at like coins or something just shiny. But I was looking at two eyes. Just two unyielding eyes filled with hate and rage, staring at me. I felt like they were staring through me. And then everything would fade to black. And I would just wake up so exhausted the next day, and I felt like I was losing my mind at this point. And everything just kept getting worse. Everything kept happening with more frequency and with more vigor. And I remember just these noises from the attic above would like follow me wherever I went in the apartment. Like, I would be in the kitchen and I go to the living room and I would hear these creaks go from the kitchen into the living room. Or I would be in my bedroom and I'd go to my daughter's nursery and the creaks would follow me. And I tried to just like casually bring this up to my husband because I felt like I was losing my mind and I just wanted some validation. But he said that he hadn't heard anything, and that if there was anything up there, that it was probably just raccoons. He really just played it off like it was no big deal. And so I just tried to hold it in, but it was really eating me alive. The paranoia was eating me alive. And I felt horrible. I was exhausted. I was terrified. When I would hear these noises, my hands would just shake. And I didn't know what to do. But no one else seemed to notice anything whenever friends or family would come over. No one seemed to notice anything. They would just mention how nice our apartment was and how lucky we were. And I knew that I should feel lucky, but I just didn't. I hated that apartment with everything within me. All I wanted was to go, but I didn't want to give up what my husband loved so much. And I knew that this would be a great place for my daughter, but I just hated it. It terrified me. I felt like that place was making me lose my mind until one day my daughter was in her nursery. At that point, I really didn't like to leave her alone in any room, but she was sleeping really peacefully in her crib in her nursery, and so I just left her in there with the door open, and I was in the living room folding laundry when all of a sudden I just remember hearing these low, rapid whispers. And so I just dropped the laundry right there, and I rushed into my daughter's nursery. And as I rushed in, I looked up at the vents, and I saw 2 glints of light quickly disappear. And at that point, I was very, very, very familiar with those glints of light. They were the eyes that I had been seeing in my dreams every night. I knew what they were, and I remember terror rushing through me. I remember the hairs on my arms standing up and my throat tightening, and I just grabbed my daughter and I rushed downstairs, and I started beating on my downstairs neighbor's door, and I begged him to let us use his phone, and he was very kind and he let us use it, and I called the cops immediately. I was admittedly hysterical, and I wasn't sounding particularly competent on the phone because as I mentioned, I was just in a really bad place mentally at that point. I was so tired and I was so scared, and I was shaking at this point. And so the cops, they thought that I was just they just wrote me off as being a crazy lady. And they came by though, still, just to get me off of their back. And when they came, they were very condescending and talked to me like I was a kindergartner, and said they would, search the attic because that was where I was hearing all of these noises from. And at that point, I was convinced that there was someone up there and there was someone watching us. And so they said they would go up and search it for a couple minutes and let us know if they found anything. They were confident they wouldn't find anything, but they went up, and when they were up there for about 12 minutes, I knew that they had found something. And then a few more cops showed up. I think there were about 7 cops there. And they taped off the area to get into the attic. And they were taking things in and out, and we didn't know exactly what was happening. No one filled us in for a while, but then about like an hour and 20 minutes in, an officer came up to me and he started asking me a few questions, like what kind of experiences did I have exactly with hearing things in the attic or seeing anything, or there possibly being anyone or any intruders in our house. And I told him everything that I knew. And then he went on to tell us that they had found some disturbing things in the attic. They found an area, a sleeping area in the attic, and surrounding it were stacks of books and journals. The books were on very disturbing topics, such as different ways to dispose of a human body, cult sacrifices, and things like that. And the journals were even worse. Basically, the journals had a bunch of pictures of my family, specifically me and my daughter, mostly. And there were these horrible passages. According to the officer, I didn't actually get to look at the journal, but he told us that they included some very disturbing things that he wanted to do to us. They hadn't actually seen the man, but he did refer to himself as he, so they knew that the person who had been up there was a he. And he was referring to the types of things that he wanted to do to us, and terrible things, and that had to do with sacrificing and human sacrifice and regarding us, and horrible things, I guess, that he had done to the 2 girls that had lived there before we did. And when I found out about the journals and that there had really been someone up there and that it had finally been validated, I almost felt numb. I don't know. It was just like something that I had told myself was make-believe this whole time wasn't, and it was just such a surreal feeling. And when my husband finally got back from work that day, he went up to the apartment and grabbed a few just essential things, and we left for a relative's house and stayed there until we got a new apartment. Me and my daughter never went in that apartment ever again. We didn't care how many police officers were around. We were never going in that apartment again. And they never found the bodies or the car of the missing girls that lived there before, or the person who was in the attic. That was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. But I don't know, I have such strange mixed feelings about the whole thing. I do feel scared when I think back on it, but I still feel a sort of sense of it just not being real, because for so long I convinced myself that it wasn't real. So I don't know. Everyone, whenever I tell anyone the story, they just, they're surprised at how composed I am. But I don't know how to explain it, because even as I tell the story, I don't know which parts exactly are real. I know that there are some absolutely that are real. I know that there was a man in our attic, and I know that he had been watching my family. But I don't know if the humming when I was in the shower was real. I don't know if the snorts from the attic when my husband and I were watching that movie, I don't know if that was real. I don't know if my dreams were real, and I don't know if the noises that I heard following me from room to room were real. I don't know. I mean, I've got to believe that some portion of it is real, but it's so hard to distinguish the paranoia versus what really happened, and that is the strangest part of it all. And so, in a strange way, I feel relieved finding out that there was someone up there, because that means that I'm not crazy. But it's also really scary because I don't know how close we were to something happening. I don't know if we were months, weeks, days, minutes away from this person just doing the unthinkable. I'll never know exactly what parts of that story are real, but maybe it's better that way.